Please hold whilst we connect you to Redacted.
This is Fraser Greenfield.
This is Louis Mills.
And this is Marius Myking. You're listening to Redact.
Today, we are joined by Marius Myking, the Director of Product Design at Snøhetta, an international architecture and design company headquartered in Oslo, Norway. Founded in 1989, Snøhetta has been making waves with major architectural projects like the New Library of Alexandria and the Norwegian National Opera and Ballet Center, to name a few. But we are really excited to talk to the head of Snøhetta's product and industrial design team, Marius. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here.
To those who don't know who you are, who is Marius Myking in 100 words or less?
I'm a designer and strategist working on building up Snøhetta's product design focus, leveraging the accumulated knowledge and experience through our studios around the globe. We use this knowledge and experience from all our other projects to inform the designs and the projects that we dive into, primarily focus on product design.
It sounds like a lot of responsibility. How did you initially discover industrial design?
There's many versions of that story, but maybe the one that is the easiest one is that I'm from a family that isn't that focused on creativity, but more from a retail side. So it took me quite some time before actually discovering and understanding that design was something you could do. I'd heard of architecture, I heard of art, but I actually started out as a carpenter and literally took a degree here in Norway, as you have to do to become a carpenter, and had the pleasure of working with some really great interior architects on some unique projects. Those experiences in those years as a carpenter taught me how much I enjoyed maybe more the act of creating rather than literally building something that someone else had built. I decided to go back to school to explore that further.
Wow. Was there any products you had in your mind at this time, or you wanted to lean into everything or more design in an interior way? What kind of design were you aiming at that time?
At that time, the only thing I knew really was interior architecture, aside from being an architect. I was lucky enough to get into one of the more prestigious schools in Norway when it comes to design and art, called the National School of Art and Design in Bergen. And there, the interior architecture degree was combined with furniture design. And that's where I really found this new love or interest of actually working in that scale, the perfection of the millimeters. One part that was really amazing about this school was actually that the resources in that sense of the workspaces, the work labs, where you actually made prototypes, the only way of actually showing a design was to make it.
What year was this for reference?
At this point, I think this was 2006. 3D, sure, it had started, obviously. But as a student, the main focus was literally making things. And at this school, it meant first you had to make the machines that allowed you to make the products that you wanted to do.
So incredibly hands-on.
Very hands-on. And I had some amazing classmates that taught me so much during these years, and we just kept pushing each other into testing new grounds.
Were there any standout projects from your time there in Oslo?
Well, I mean, it's quite some time, but I was lucky enough to already, while doing my bachelor, getting one of my prototypes into production with a Swedish manufacturer. That happening spurred the next big decision in my career.
What big decision is that? Because I heard a rumor that you went to America shortly after this.
Yeah, no, I did. Getting this into production so early, I thought it was amazing, but also it quickly learned me how little I actually knew about the business and the industry. I thought that if I wanted to work on design on an international level, I probably need to build some international experience and learn from someone who has been doing that on their own. And that led me to go to New York.
And what did that process look like?
To go to New York?
Yeah. Was it like every Hollywood movie? You just pack your bags and move across the country with a new summer dress?
I think everyone more or less says this, but New York is the best of life and it's the worst of life, and you're getting all of it. It's one of the toughest journeys I've had, but I'm also very grateful of having done that.
Was that a youth exchange visa and you just decided to move to York and trying to find something, or did you write 50,000 emails to every design studio in North America?
The easiest way of going to New York, because I was very determined on New York, quoting Frank Sinatra, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. New York was just this magical, interesting place that just drove my curiosity. I found that the best way of doing this was to finish my master's in New York. So at first I had a student visa and took 2 years at Pratt Institute. Based on that, I was given an O1 visa, which is popularly called a talent visa. And that allowed me to work in New York.
What were you doing in New York then?
Before finishing at Pratt, I was lucky enough to be offered jobs at 2 different studios. One being CDF, this legendary design and consultancy studio in New York run by Jeffrey Burnett, and another opportunity to help build Bracher Studio. I ended up working with Todd Bracher there for almost 5 years, helping to build that studio with such a large variety of clients and types of projects.
What would you say were the key things that you learned under Mr. Brasher?
We pushed each other in terms of what role design should have in developing companies and developing products, how to ensure that the projects that you do take on, can you make sure that they are successful, that they live in the right or are designed for the right ecosystem.
When you talk about that, what ideas were you bouncing around that were the most valuable in that respect for companies? Do you take a look at the landscape and where they fit, or it's focusing on the user? Is there anything in particular that made it different from how other studios look at it?
I'm sure that in some sense all studios are different, but also somewhat alike. The advantage that you have when you're sitting on the outside and working with the inside is that you can imply a little bit of naivete to some of these companies that are harder to see from the inside. And you have the ability to validate good ideas in a way that may be harder to validate from the inside as well. So much about this is much more just about working with people, empowering people within the companies that you're collaborating with, allowing them to be able to do the best job that they can do. And I think that's a little bit of a forgotten trade or important quality when it comes to design.
Lost magic, almost.
Yeah.
How do you keep the black magic alive in an organization? How do you prevent it from being lost?
Dream big.
You make it sound very simple, but a lot of people close out on the dream. They lower their ambitions. They get burnt. They don't look up while they're trying to build the fire.
Og dette Marius Myking. Du hører på Redacted.
Hey everyone! This episode sponsored by PCBWay, the go-to destination for printed circuit board prototyping, low-volume production, and PCB assembly. If your team is working on electronics and you're in need of a prototype PCB, I can't recommend PCBWay enough. You can get a quote instantly, even if your circuit board schematics aren't finished yet. They can also help you with injection molded, 3D printed, sheet metal, and vacuum cast prototypes. PCBWay is the circuit board prototyper of choice for companies like Samsung, Siemens, Honeywell, Tesla, and Apple. But you don't have to be a big company to use their services. I've personally used their services to instantly get quotes and have had prototype PCBs delivered in a timely manner. On top of all of that, PCBWay is offering us a special discount just for our listeners. When you get a quote from PCBWay, be sure to use our promo code REDACTED for a special discount on us. You can find PCBWay in our episode description or go to pcbway.com.
So just to recap, you were in New York for a couple of years, working with Todd Brasher. What happened after that?
I ended up spending in total 7+ years in New York.
All of them with Todd?
No, after several years with Todd, I ventured out and created my own studio together with one of my collaborating designers, Martin Nichols. We created a studio called Everything Elevated. We did so unanimously because we had both been working in several design studios where the name was on the door and that was the big thing. And we saw firsthand how much of a hindrance that can be, not just a positive.
In what sense was it a hindrance?
Once your personal name is on something, or in that case, everything that the studio does, suddenly everything becomes your priority and your business, which isn't necessarily a good thing for the studio. It's not necessarily even what the founder wants to prioritize. Maybe it takes away also a little bit of the ownership and the credibility of all the people who are actually working to make sure that these projects are fulfilled, that they come to fruition. When in the end, it's just one person's name on it, when everything is actually quite a big collaboration. It's not necessarily something that serves the intention or even the desire of the people who actually started the studio.
Would you have stayed on if maybe they changed the name on the door or offered you a partnership?
I haven't really thought of that. And also, looking ahead is more the productive approach on things. In general, it was just something that we felt was or could be a hindrance if we wanted to grow a studio. So we wanted to make it interesting for whoever to take part in this.
I suppose you were there for a while and you felt like you needed a change, but what was that change like going from being an employee to running an entire department?
Rough. I recommend everyone or every designer out there to try doing things on their own. For some, you'll find that it's something that you really strive at and you enjoy and you keep doing it. For others, you may experience that it wasn't for you and it may actually make you more happy in your day to day and more comfortable in being more of a producing designer rather than a founder or something else, because it is a little bit of a different thing.
Was there a bit of shock at the start and it calmed down a bit, or would you say it was just all quite intense?
Starting out and doing your own studio primarily from New York, you have to pay rent.
Wow.
That's very relatable.
Heard about the rent over there from here, so that says something.
So you definitely have periods where you literally don't know how you're going to pay rent a few weeks from now. Obviously, that can be stressful. You have to make ends meet. That's the tough reality. I think also another thing is, especially maybe in New York, you realize that a lot of the competition you have may not need rent money as much as you do. You're competing both on a brand perception point of view, getting projects that you really want to do that the studio is striving for, but they're also not paying at all. And then balancing that with super interesting projects, but projects that may not be as visible out there, to make sure that you keep this balance and keep growing.
Were you able to get that growth happening after a while?
We were very lucky. We were able to utilize the network that we had to do some interesting projects and projects that were pushing more the narrative of what we wanted to do. And then we were so lucky that this Norwegian company called Snøhetta reached out.
Oh, I think I've heard of them.
And we started collaborating on several projects.
And what kind of projects were they, if you're allowed to talk about them?
The first collaboration we had was starting up developing Wi-Fi routers for Telenor, which is the largest telecommunication company in Scandinavia. Leading and developing that process was one of the first projects there. Then we also did this exhibition installation piece for Wallpaper Handmade together with Snøhetta. Obviously, these two projects have very different timelines and different scopes. During this time, together with Kjetil, one of the Snøhetta founders, saw that there is a potential of creating and professionalizing a proper product design discipline here at Snøhetta.
You mentioned the narrative of the business that you have. Did Snøhetta's narrative and theme line up with yours?
It lined up very much, and that's why it was such a good fit. Snøhetta are still working very conceptually, narratively driven, and working through close collaboration with our collaborators. It's very similar to what we were doing in Everything Elevated, but now it has grown into a different scale than obviously when we started out.
Just to clarify, Snøhetta ended up taking these projects that you did with them and thinking, this Marius guy, we need him on the team and we need him to build a team for us. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't put it like that. We saw great potential and we started working on it. And this is where we are today.
When did they move you back to Norway?
At that point, I was flying back and forth. Working here at Snøhetta in Oslo is probably the closest you'll get to New York in Oslo. We are 150 people in this studio alone, which is the headquarters. I believe we have more than 30 different nationalities in here. I'm actually the only Norwegian on the product design team. We've been able to get some of the best product design talent out there to come and join our team here in Oslo, which is quite amazing.
That is amazing.
Congratulations.
Would you say that that would have been one of the biggest challenges, scaling that up and getting these people from all around the world?
It is one challenge, but I think everything is challenging if you're doing product design.
Yeah, that's true.
There are certainly easier ways or easier career paths to take.
Yeah, we don't do it because it's easy, that's for sure.
Dette Marius Myking. Du hører på Redacted.
Snøhetta is primarily more of an architectural company. Was it challenging building up this industrial design arm of this business?
One thing that is very important to know about Snøhetta, I'm Norwegian, I grew up here, so I take it a little bit for granted, right? But Snøhetta started in 1989, was actually started as a multidisciplinary studio. At that point, the founders consisted of architects, landscape architects, and actual artists. With that multidisciplinary team, Snøhetta was able to win the competition of designing the Library of Alexandria. The foundation was already there, and 15 years ago, graphic and digital was started up. So it became quite natural to also develop a product design discipline into this multidisciplinary company culture.
And just for reference, this is Biblioteca of Alexandria in Alexandria, Egypt.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have a link to that in the show notes for anyone listening in.
Redacted.
Were there any unexpected synergies of having this foundationally multidisciplinary studio that you found when you got here?
There's a lot of people, so it takes time to get to know 150 people, right? I remember the first year working here, getting to know people individually, understanding the way that they work, the way they were thinking, what kind of skill sets they had. It was such an incredible collective spirit in here. And I was struck time and again of the amount of talent that was gathered under one roof here. Coming from smaller studio environments and then suddenly sitting in this ocean of incredibly talented people working on some of the most amazing projects out there, understanding how that worked, gaining a better understanding of how we could contribute then with product design, leveraging that knowledge was mind-boggling, at least the first year, but I keep getting surprised and inspired every day at work.
Can you share one of those surprises?
One thing that is quite unique here is that we don't have departments in the normal sense. We don't sit in groups of teams or by position. Each 18 months, we have a lottery, and the lottery determines where you sit.
What?
So that actually means that you can be sitting next to a founder, next to an intern. You'll sit next to someone from accounting. You'll sit next to a landscape architect or maybe someone from the communications team. And it's this shared mixing where the intention is to make it possible to have things happen by circumstance.
I did a project for Honeywell more than 5 years ago now that was very similar to that, but every month.
It does work. I think you'd be surprised of how many things actually came about through this casual interaction. We should not underestimate the power of human interaction and how that suddenly can make big things happen.
So what, did you get invited to a different barbecue every 18 months or something? Or did you get new tattoos every 18 months with your desk buddy?
Take, for example, landscape architecture that I didn't know too much about before starting in Snøhetta. But then getting a better understanding of the expertise that a landscape architect is considering and doing day out and day in. By understanding that when we were called by ASAK, this Norwegian concrete paving company, they called me up one day and asked if we would consider working with them because they wanted to challenge the industry that they were in. I already knew that this could be interesting based on what I had learned from the landscape architects. We put a plan together and we developed new types of permeable paving for this company. And that has suddenly turned into one of the most liked projects on our social media platform. And it has turned ASAK into going from a strict Norwegian supplier, now suddenly answering global project needs. And in that sense, the whole idea of this project like that, it needs to be locally manufactured. So now suddenly we're sitting and we're working together with ASAK and contributing, helping them creating these licensing deals abroad rather than helping them sell and ship this. It's quite a big shift in design, I think. And you could say some of that started because through a lottery, I was suddenly sitting next to a landscape architect and not a product designer. And then things just grows from there.
You can't talk about being inspired by someone and not name drop. You got to give them credit where credit's due.
Who was it?
Multiple. There's so many inspiring people here. But we did have a great collaboration internally as well.
Cool.
Well, it sounds like you've got a great place to work, but what about the way you work? What would you say is the Snøhetta design process, and why do you do it this way?
When we started product design here at Snøhetta, we spent quite some time trying to understand or prove what would be the product design way now in the context of Snøhetta. And as every architectural project is so contextual, relating to where it is, where it needs to be, what is it next to, and so on. In the same sense, product design also needs to be contextual. But in this sense, it is who is it for? What are the unique resources and the unique skill sets that we have to work with in this collaboration? Where is the company going? Where do they want to go? Where do we think we could come together as one and create something that none of us could create on our own, but only together? And finding that spot of collaboration has been the cornerstone of our developments.
Do you have any examples of that key collaboration that you've had?
I think all of these collaborations are like that. We work very hard not to adhere to some sort of a style or sense, but rather a process of true collaboration. We don't really pitch that much. We offer a process of what we call strategic alignment, which is the first phase of getting to know each other, having the ability to ask all the dumb questions, with different exercises, getting to know each other better, and together define a creative brief, one that is not just about how something looks like, but it's about what do we want design in this sense to actually do for the company that we're working with.
What does that alignment process look like? Do you do trust exercises where you fall into each other's arms, or is it more a sit down and questioning of what they want to achieve and what their hopes and dreams are?
We have quite a big array of types of collaborations. We have very much strategic collaborations where we're helping much more holistically, meaning it's not necessarily even a product design in the end, but it may be a company that is doing or are producing products, but they need help on other areas as well. We may be able to pull in graphic designers, digital designers, interior architects to create this really strong design team that can help delivering valuable design for that company. We also have one tool that we use quite a bit for all of our disciplines, and it's the Snøhetta Concept Workshop, which we've developed together with a research program called SINTEF. And we utilize this to find a core concept for any collaboration, whether it is an architect project, landscape architect, if it's a new visual identity, or if it is a product. When we employ this concept workshop, it allows us to have a red thread through all types of collaborations that we may have with a client. And that could then be the starting point of creating both an interior, products, visual identity, a new website, and so on, ensuring that everything actually has the same core value at the base.
Building on that, at your time with Snøhetta, have you brought anything to the company to change things up? And if so, how were your ideas received and how did you manage to push your ideas across the line to a large company?
Part of the magic here at Snøhetta is that it's pushed creatively by everyone working here. The strongest way that we can really make an impact is through the projects that we do. We work hard to make sure that the projects speak for themselves. The better the project, the less we have to say.
Would you say that everyone there has a say in the processes and a say in the direction of the company and things like that, or no?
We are a company very much run on Scandinavian values, so a very flat hierarchy, and utilize that as a strength is something that we're consistently working on.
So what you're saying is you could win the lottery and end up sitting with some of the executives of Snøhetta.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Has anyone ever rigged the lottery?
If they really want to sit next to their best friend for another 18 months.
Oh, I think that will be tough.
See, it is possible. It is possible.
Hasn't been done.
Maybe one of us will be the first.
Redacted, 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 redacted.
What would you say is unique and valuable about the Snøhetta way of doing things?
The portfolio and projects speak for themselves. The starting point of Snøhetta being based on social values is something that we see is just becoming more and more relevant. We are very much trying to make the world a little bit better project by project. Some projects we're able to make small steps, but in some other projects, we may be able to take big leaps. And figuring out how we can get the most impact for each project, I truly believe is beneficial for everyone.
It sounds very different to a lot of churn and burn organizations out there where it's all about getting the billable hours out. This is something that clearly wasn't done overnight. And I know you only came in maybe halfway through the process, and I hope you'll stay there for a much longer time onwards. How did you build the Snøhetta way of doing things?
By trying, testing, failing, reiterating. The most important project that we do have is actually Snøhetta. And for that reason, we are in a continuous state of reinvention, meaning we should always be questioning ourselves. Are we doing it the right way? Are we doing it the best way? How can we improve? How can we keep pushing ourselves? How can we ensure that we come up with ideas that can be for today, but also for the future? How can we help convince our clients to see the light or to believe that we can get there? And this continuous state of reinvention is something that we're constantly working on.
How do you keep on track? Is there someone in the business who's your North Star that keeps you going? Or is it something that you pick the right team so that that culture is continued?
For product design, a big part of this is obviously my job, but I take great inspiration and learning both from my team and also from all the other disciplines and the continuous discussions that we have internally. Every second year, the entire Snøhetta team gathers on Dovre, which is where the Snøhetta mountain lives. We gather there for a weekend to talk about everything except design and architecture, talking about the things that really inspiring us or we're worried about, to come together as people, not just as employees or managers or these titles, but to meet each other and enjoy being together as people.
Wow. I think if more businesses did that, that would be amazing. I've never heard that before. That's really cool. You mentioned some big leaps in projects before, and you were talking a bit about the process. And I was just looking at this array chair, and I was wondering if you could just walk us through this project a little bit, because it just looks amazing. It's a chair that I've never seen before.
The array sofa system is a modular system that we've developed together with MDF Italia. It's based on a brief of rethinking how the sofa is produced today. Instead of looking at a large piece. What if we go into micro and we really thoroughly design that smaller piece in a way that makes it so flexible that now you can plan and you can play into larger assemblies and large areas? This hasn't come about because we had a cool looking sketch. This came about through strategic alignment, understanding the needs of MDF Italia that we did this with, and then also holding them accountable for, if we have these ambitions, X, Y, Z, that means this. We sat together and we talked more about approaches rather than design, and together defined a way of pushing the boundaries for comfort. And when we're looking at comfort, it needs to be the entire ecosystem of comfort, not just how it is to sit in. Yes, that needs to be comfortable, but also how is it manufactured? How can it be altered? How is the logistics of actually manufacturing this, shipping it, where weight comes in? Can we make it lighter? Can we look critically at how sofas today are made, which very few have actually pushed that much on? And looking into utilizing today's technology to make sure that we could have better answers to all these questions. And at the same time, there needs to be a very strong balance between creativity with emotional design, but also with business in design. If we want to have an impact in anything that has more regenerative design qualities about itself, it also needs to be achievable. We need to reach the price points where it actually can be adapted in the market. This system is answering a very demanding brief, but then there needs to be the guts from manufacturers to also go in and invest more and go a little bit above and beyond to go to the next step to be able to deliver on that. We can't keep doing the exact same thing and expecting different results, basically. I love when I can say this, especially with the context that we have, that we're thinking, if we think really small, we can go really big.
I like that.
You're like an ant lifting 20 times your weight. As I understand it, you used a lot of recycled or at least biologically derived materials in this sofa, as well as injection molding.
All the materials and all the components are detachable, already making it much easier to replace, repair, remove, or even update. Today, we don't have all the answers for a perfect world materially and manufacturing speaking, but there may be opportunities for designing for that future, things that may be achievable in the future. We hope that this is learning or leaning heavily towards that. But even having these detachable materials, recycled plastics, recycled foam, and being able to be more conscious about the choices that you do take is a big help.
Did you set up a brief with color, material, and finish in this work?
In this one, the CMF was very much a collaboration with MDF Italia, as MDF Italia is also led by Marco Casina and Frederick Billio to look ahead for what will be the next generation. They are quite heavily and very good at working in defining that kind of brand.
Does Snøhetta have their own process for implementing, iterating, and innovating with CMF?
We do that sometimes as a separate project in itself. Depending on the project, we love to integrate maybe even some of our interior architects or architects, depending on literally what it is we're developing CMF for. If we're doing furniture, it makes sense to work with our interior architects to make sure that we adhere to palette and understanding of that space when we are developing this.
Okay.
Can you share a bit about a project where the color, material, and finish had a significant impact on the outcome of that project?
There are two that are very different, or opposites, I would say. One is by developing the social chair and working with Varier. That whole project actually got started by working on the CMF for the entire brand. The CMF of Varier developing something that was in line with their values. So we started out doing a concept workshop defining basically the core value of Varier as being movement. And with that, we defined an active and a relaxed color variation or CMF choice, being two different scales and opposites, and hence being about movement. We worked on this together with our interior architects to make sure that we hit the right marks, and we hit this together with Kvadrat here, making an exclusive material palette for Varier. A second one where CMF had pretty much nothing to do was actually almost the opposite, was developing these 4-eyed tiles, where literally the whole color and materiality came through the process. And by designing more of the process as something that you could call semi-controllable, you allow for inconsistencies being part of the value chain. Maybe our earliest, or one of the earliest attempts that we have on understanding what will be valuable going into the future. We come out of this time and era where we've spent so much time trying to perfect everything, that everything needs to be color correct up against anything, while at the same time we're celebrating these unique, noble materials that are different all the times. Marble, stained glass. At some point, we may have to question ourselves what true beauty and quality is in this new reality that we're part of now.
And these 4-eyed tiles, it's basically recycled glass tiles made from electronics waste. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you were trying to find the beauty in the chaos that it ended up producing.
Yeah.
So what's the dream goal for the Snøhetta design team? Or what would your dream goal be within Snøhetta?
We live in a very special time, and perhaps design has never been more important as now. For us here at Snøhetta, we really hope that we can be part of the solution and be a driving force for that. Exactly what that will mean, what that one project will be, I'm not sure. And maybe it's not one project. Maybe it is more this iterative change that if we all keep pushing at it, keep doing it, we may be able to make a difference even quicker and learn from each other, but then also learn from our mistakes. What we try to talk about a lot internally is that every project that we do has the potential of making a positive impact. Again, some may have a small positive impact. Some may have a big one. In our experience, a lot of these projects have a bigger impact than we thought it would have. So I wouldn't be afraid of going even for small, impactful projects and keep building on it.
Wow, that's a really good answer. I wasn't expecting that. I suppose we all want to be part of the solution because in design and creating things, we've all made so many mistakes. Any change in the right direction is good.
Redacted.
There's often a big difference between people doing independent furniture practices, which border on art and they really struggle as a business, and designing for large projects. How would you say it compares being a boutique self-employed furniture designer to being an in-house designer at Snøhetta?
This is two different worlds. Everyone here is working for a bigger cause. And in that sense, it's not make or break with one project for us, which allows us to work much more on the process itself and continuously improve on it. So we may be able to work on a larger picture or larger horizon maybe. At the same time, I have to say I have huge respect for these boutique designers, incredibly good, incredibly creative. And I know that that is incredibly demanding as well in all aspects. When you're doing that, you're doing everything, not only design. And there's so little of what you're actually doing that we actually end up seeing. It's hard to compare the two. However, at points, we may be able to learn from each other. We try to share with as many people we can and also learn from each other.
And could you share some of those learnings?
An interesting counterpoint. We just started our second collaboration now with Plushalle, this Danish company, where we take part in the annual briefing. And it means a collaborative design projects where we get to work on our own pitch, our own process, but we also get to do it collaboratively with other design studios. And this is a really, really interesting approach where we get to learn, and hopefully some people get to learn from us as well. We do try to facilitate more of these learnings too. But I would say one thing that is a little bit special with being part of Snøhetta, collaboration is ingrained in the whole ecosystem because you can't do an opera on your own. Having projects all across the globe means that we have to have collaborators all across the globe as well. Just in terms of licensing, If you're doing an architectural project in one place, you need local permission, you need local expertise. So this type of collaborative spirit is heavily ingrained in how we work and how we are open for collaboration as well.
Mm. And whereabouts are the other studios on the Snøhetta located?
Our headquarters is here in Oslo. Then we have one in Paris, one in Innsbruck, one in New York, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Adelaide, and Melbourne.
Wow.
Oh, there's two in Australia.
Yeah. The last one in Melbourne is quite new.
You must have slid under the radar for us.
If you work at the Snøhetta office in Melbourne, come to our meetups because we'd love to meet you.
Why Adelaide first?
How Snøhetta has been growing has been up until lately quite organically, driven by projects, driven by people.
What would you say when it comes to getting projects that drive Snøhetta, drive growth? What's the best way to draw in clients that really fits with your team's goals?
Talking for product design. The best way for us to do that is through the projects that we are doing. And to make sure that our designs and our projects communicates for us. And that is a dialogue that we have continuously during our projects. What is our aim of this to actually communicate in the end? In that sense, we're constantly utilizing our portfolio also as an active business tool, but founded on these Scandinavian values on how to make an impact one project at a time. Redacted, 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 redacted.
So, what's been your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
It's such a hard question, not because there's a lack of failure, but rather the opposite.
A lack of learning?
Yeah, lack of learning. We could sit all week, talk about things that I wish I had done differently or better. But when you are working in this field, there's no perfect playbook. There's not one right way of doing it. There's a hell of a lot of wrong ways of doing it. But no one can really say this is the way of doing it. So you have to keep trying and just learn from those mistakes. Going from being more of an independent designer into creating a team, into building a culture inside of a big culture, the one thing that I underestimated was the human aspect of things. Internal alignment, not just external, but aligning and understanding the bigger internal ecosystem and how to contribute with that in the most valuable way.
Mm. And what do you typically look for in a designer when you're looking to expand your team?
These days, it's almost more about personality. We're going to spend so much time together, so we better like each other.
You only need to like them for 18 months, then they'll go to the other side of the building.
Exactly.
Is that the secret? You talked about having an internal alignment. And when we look at design consultancies, if I was to say that they're a person, they often don't have that internal alignment. They don't necessarily reach their potential. What do you think is holding other design consultancies, other teams back from reaching that potential, that alignment, if you will?
It's very hard to talk about what others do or don't. I don't even know if we've reached our potential. And if I had, maybe I would have been bored at this point. It's this search for what is that potential and how can we create that? Having a team that is also eager to push that potential. That's the important part. I do think, and maybe this is in fear of sounding like a very old man.
You don't look a day over 25.
In the environment that we live in today, with what seems to be fast, quick solutions, it really takes grit and it takes a long time to succeed with something. And if you're doing product design, when you've successfully been able to do a project, you have years behind you of tough collaboration, decision making, risk taking that no one else sees. They just see this final product. But that takes such a long time. And if you're on a licensing contract, it's going to take even longer until you actually see a revenue to it. Being realistic about this and also setting up a business model that allows for it is very crucial. And if that business model can also allow for balancing in high quality work that you can also enjoy, that may be a good recipe as a starting point. as a starting point.
Thank you, Marius, for joining us on the show today. For our listeners, don't forget to check out the notes and links to anything we've mentioned, where to follow the show, see Marius's or Snøhetta's work, plus the discounts from our sponsor, PCBWay. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, this has been Redacted.
The number you have dialed has not been recognized. Please check and try again. The number you have dialed has been
Redacted.